Can you guess which of these three blocks of text is the most appropriate for novels? If you guessed this one, you are correct. But why aren't the other two just as good for novels? Why does the text layout matter just as much as the story itself? This is what we're going to cover on today's video, the truth behind paragraph lengths. Hi, I'm Vivian Nagy. I am a freelance book editor and I am here to help you make your story shine. And welcome to Nagy in the Margins. You may think that paragraphs are simply related to grammar and that's it. Well, let me tell you something, it's not. Paragraphs are there to act as visual cues to your reader. They are there to serve as a roadmap to guide them through the flow of reading. Think of this for a minute. You are there, laying on your bed, late at night, reading your book, and you want to keep reading. You're just saying just a bit more, just to finish a bit. But then you turn the page, and what you see is this huge wall of text. Your brain will go, nope, not today, Satan, not today. You are going to not keep reading. You are going to stop there because it's late at night. You don't have the mental capacity to process that big chunk of text. You don't have to read the paragraph. You don't have to read the lines that are there to know it requires more mental energy, more mental capacity than you late at night have to offer. But simply by looking at that page, you know that we will require more effort than a simple standard page. These chunky paragraphs we usually see in nonfiction or in textbooks because they are there, these types of books, they are there to share information, to share knowledge. And of course, there are plenty of nonfiction books that are breaking this barrier nowadays, that are making the sharing of the knowledge easier, more fun even, to learn about something new. But the standard is that for nonfiction, for textbooks, we have longer paragraphs, bigger chunks of text to pass an information. On the other hand, if you pick up a book, you open it, and then you see a block of text like this, then your brain instantly might think, this is too childish. Why is that? Because early readers, so kids, teenagers, they still are acquiring the reading skill. So, because of that, they need more breaks, more pauses, more breathing room to process the information. So, all the information they receive, be it fiction or non-fiction, they must go in smaller chunks. They must be in smaller pieces. Editor Vivian here to add that they also have lots of images because of that. But for seasoned readers like you and I, that tidbit of information coming from very spaced out paragraphs will become dull to read. It will be boring. It won't be engaging because it feels hollow. It feels like it's missing the real thing. It's like we are reading a list of facts instead of a real story, you know. For early readers, that works just fine because they are still acquiring the process of reading a lot of information and processing it as a whole. They still need the bit by bit. We don't. And that's what we are going to discuss today. How can we find that sweet spot of paragraphs to keep our readers engaged? Just before we move on, just two quick reminders. First off is that I am a fiction book editor, which means that I am focusing on the art of storytelling. Poetry and nonfiction have a separate set of rules that do not apply to fiction and vice versa. So keep that in mind as we are following. Most of my content here on the channel is for fiction, okay? Fiction novels, usually fiction short stories, fiction stories, okay? So we are going to talk about the art of storytelling, so poetry and nonfiction will not apply. And second reminder is that today's video, I will be focusing on YA and older. So books for young adults and older, meaning that for early teens, as I've briefly mentioned, they have also a separate set of rules on how to set your paragraphs, on how to lay out your page. Today, in this video, we are going to focus on the young adult and older. So everything that is the standard novel that we see out there. And just a little addition, short paragraphs per se are not bad, okay? Keep that in mind. Short paragraphs, long paragraphs per se, they are not bad. It does not equal bad. What makes them bad is the context, is where they are placed, comparing them with the other paragraphs, with the other things that are on the page, okay? And that's what we are going to discuss today. Okay, so how can we find the best length for your paragraph? The first step is to think what is the essence of that paragraph. Because the essence of the paragraph is the main idea the paragraph is discussing, that usually tells us what is the length that paragraph will require, or if we will require more than one paragraph to discuss that idea. So let's think. Are we introducing a character, describing a scenario, describing an action sequence? Are we debating a philosophical theme that is relevant to your novel? If we are deep within the internal monologue of the character, then yes, it's normal for the paragraphs to be longer. If it is that debating of a philosophical theme, the paragraphs will be longer. And of course, if it is an action sequence, probably the paragraphs will be shorter. But the basic rule to remember, especially if you are starting the writing career, is to follow the 3 to 6 sentences rule. This rule is basically for you to remember if it is the first time that I am mentioning that thing, that I am describing that thing, it is when I am introducing something, I will keep it from 3 to 6 sentences. For those of you who don't know, a sentence is a group of words that express a complete idea. A sentence then will always start with a capital letter and always end with either a full stop, a question mark, or an exclamation mark. Every sentence must have a subject and a verb, and it must stand on its own. It can stand on its own, it doesn't need any complement. And of course, there are exceptions, okay? But we are not gonna go in detail because this is not a video of grammar, this is a video of paragraphs. Okay, so why 3 to 6 sentences, you might ask? Basically, it's because 2 sentences is too short for you to introduce something, and 6 sentences is the limit because from 7 sentences on, probably your reader will become tired of learning something new. So 6 sentences is like the good limit for a new introduction about something. So let's imagine that I am presenting a character of mine, cleaning up a mess she made after hearing plot essential gossip. The repetitive movement of scrubbing the carpet back and forth made her arms burn. Leah sat on her heels for a moment, using the back of her wrist to push away the strand of brown hair that stuck to her sweaty face. That's it. If I stop here, you will be wondering, okay, and what's next? And okay, it's a great start for introducing something, but it's not the full deal. We are missing something. And you may be thinking now, but Vivian, this is great. Great for capturing the reader's interest and keeping them engaged. And you have a point. You are right about that. But the problem, as I said before, is when every paragraph is that short. Can you imagine reading a full page where every paragraph is less than 3 sentences long? It becomes tiresome. So, as an example, I took here the whole thing. Let me show to you what it looks like on the page. The repetitive movement of scrubbing the carpet back and forth made her arms burn. Leah sat on her heels for a moment, using the back of her wrist to push away the strand of brown hair that stuck to her sweaty face. She knew she shouldn't have brought the glass to her room, but the gossip had been too good to miss. The effort was making her white skin turn red. She didn't even have to look in the mirror to know it. She leaned forward again. The stain had dried, and it didn't seem to want to come off. Still, she scrubbed, thinking about what Charlotte had shared. I am sorry, but this isn't a story, it's a list of facts. Can you see how fact listing it looks? Take a moment to notice how much our eyes pause to go from one paragraph to the next. There are too many pauses here. It's too chunky, too broken. These many pauses makes the flow of the text feel truncated, choppy. It's like we are in a traffic jam and then the car starts and then stops. And then starts and then stops. And then starts and then stops. It doesn't have a fluid motion for us to keep reading naturally. So now you might think, okay, then let's just put it all together. Let's make it one whole paragraph. And then we go to the other problem. Yes, the flow might be better, but when we solve the problem of the flow, we create the problem of ideas getting lost. Even though that previous one still looks choppy and the flow doesn't work, we know what was being said. Let's read now the full thing put together.
The repetitive movement of scrubbing the carpet back and forth made her arms burn. Leah sat on her heels for a moment, using the back of her wrist to push away the strand of brown hair that stuck to her sweaty face. She knew she shouldn't have brought the glass to her room, but the gossip had been too good to miss. The effort was making her white skin turn red. She didn't even have to look in the mirror to know it. She leaned forward again. The stain had dried, and it didn't seem to want to come off. Still, she scrubbed, thinking about what Charlotte had shared.
You see that in this case, that idea of the gossip is missing, is buried beneath all of the other sentences? Because it is too fluid now, our eyes move past the information and we don't retain what is necessary. We don't have that necessary room to breathe and process what we have learned. This is why I always recommend to keep between 3 to 6 sentences in most cases. In this example scene that I wrote, we have 8 sentences and they are separated like this. These are the 8 sentences that constitute that block of text. Take a moment to read it. Now I'm going to show you what we can do to make the reading flow good and to help the reader retain the correct information we want them to retain.
The repetitive movement of scrubbing the carpet back and forth made her arms burn. Leah sat on her heels for a moment, using the back of her wrist to push away the strand of brown hair that stuck to her sweaty face. She knew she shouldn't have brought the glass to her room, but the gossip had been too good to miss. The effort was making her white skin turn red. She didn't even have to look in the mirror to know it. She leaned forward again. The stain had dried, and it didn't seem to want to come off. Still, she scrubbed, thinking about what Charlotte had shared.
It's good to read out loud because you see when the breaks are required. It's good for you to breathe while you are reading, of course, but this breathing room you give yourself when reading out loud also signals to your brain, okay, this is a good moment to stop to process what has been said. And not only does it give the reader a good breathing room, it also gives the reader that pacing of intrigue. We are able to connect the 2 paragraphs in a smooth way. The first paragraph, the focus on what Leah was doing, and the gossip information was just sprinkled there to entice the curiosity of the reader. And then we give the break so that the second paragraph, the sprinkled thing, is actually Leah's actions. And then we can focus on the gossip itself. And now, if you want to take this even further, like the next step of setting your paragraph's layout, you can use dialogue. Dialogue can act as your natural axe, chopping down the big chunks of text that you have. Because every time a new character speaks is a mandatory paragraph break. So every time you're going to start a dialogue, you press that enter. But you can also use the dialogues to prolong your paragraphs too. Instead of having just one line of paragraph and that's it, you can use the actions of the character after the speech within the same line, within the same paragraph. And then instead of having just one line, you have 3, 4 lines, and maybe 3 sentences, who knows? And the best thing about the dialogues is that you can use them to tweak things a little bit. You have a full description paragraph where you needed to go over 8 sentences. And that's fine, because then you can insert a one-line dialogue. That dialogue will help your reader refocus, reset their brain to pay attention to what you were writing, to what you were saying. This is how you build the narrative rhythm. A fluid text, an easy to follow novel, is a mixture of these different types of paragraphs. I've seen some people call it the accordion effect because we expand to show detail and then we shrink to show action. We expand to introduce something, then we shrink to show the impact. So it's an accordion effect. If this is your first time writing, you are starting this, I highly recommend you stick first to those 3 to 6 sentences rule, just so you can get familiar with how the standard size paragraph looks like. But as you are improving and getting better at your writing more and more with more practice, then you can use those writing mechanisms a little bit to your will. You can start playing with the layout of the pages of the paragraphs, because the more you write, the more you practice, the more you get familiar with the rules, and because you know the rules, you are familiar with them, the more you can try to go outside them, break the rules. Just to show you how this looks in practice, we're going to look at 2 layouts of pages from 2 books that I love, just so you can see like what experienced writers are doing. The first one will be The Hunger Games. I love them. I love The Hunger Games. You're going to see me talk a lot about this one. If we take a look, the overall layout seems like there is big chunks of text. Big chunks of text. But as you are reading, you can see that you have a lot of dialogues that are short too. So there is no problem with having longer paragraphs if there is dialogue in the middle, if there is dialogue intertwining them. Like here on this page, we start with dialogues, then we have a shorter paragraph, a bit of a longer paragraph that continues up to here, and then a shorter paragraph. And then we have a mid-paragraph, short paragraph, mid-paragraph, short paragraph, and so on. So this is how you can use, for example, no problem in having one long paragraph in your story. The problem is if they are consequently following one another. The second book that I'm going to talk about is The Queen of Kings by Mariah Davana Headley. I hope I said that right. She also has what seems like big chunks of text, but she also breaks them a lot with dialogue. If you take here the 11th chapter, we have a small paragraph, dialogue, 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 small paragraph, and mid-size, mid-size, small paragraph, mid-size, mid-size, small paragraph, small paragraph. You see, these are the tweaks you can add to your own novel, using a mixture of all of these paragraphs to create the fluid, to create your own voice when you are narrating. And then on the Hunger Games specifically, we have a nice play of the paragraphs, because in the later sections, we have huge chunks of text. But Suzanne Collins did something awesome, that the text is choppy, not because of the paragraph's layout, but because of the sentences within the paragraph. The paragraph is very long, but the sentences are very short. So it feels choppy to show her survival mode within the arena, something that we do not see that much in the beginning of the book. It's always after she enters the arena, we see shorter and shorter sentences within the paragraphs to show how her mind is being changed. And in The Queen of Kings, the paragraphs are longer, because this is based on real history. So there are plenty of moments where the author spends longer time reminding the reader of what life was back then, back on Cleopatra's time. So, in this case, it is normal to have longer paragraphs, but you saw what I showed you. She breaks those longer paragraphs with dialogues that feel natural. So the flow of the text runs so smoothly. This was so fun to read. I highly recommend it, by the way. If you like history with a paranormal twist, perfect. So I'm going to show you here one part that I selected so you can take a look at how it looks like on the page in detail. Page 121 of this edition here. I'm going to put the details on the screen. And here you can see that we start the page with a precisely 3 sentences paragraph, but 3 short sentences to create the impact of how Katniss is seeing herself after Cinna's makeover. Then we have what I told you about. We have the dialogue with descriptions of the actions. And here, Suzanne Collins do the opposite. Instead of starting with the dialogue, she starts with the action. For a while, we all just stare at me. Oh, Cinna, I finally whispered. So this is what you can do too. Put the dialogue within the actions just to create a new flow there and keep the paragraph short. Then we have another dialogue that also has 2 other sentences to complement the paragraph to keep it within 3 sentences. Then we have a mid-sized paragraph. Then we have another short paragraph, but again, 3 sentences. So, all ready for the interview then? Ask Cinna. That's 1. I can see by his expression that he's been talking to Hamish. Sentence 2. That he knows how dreadful I am. Sentence 3. It's hard to find paragraphs when it's not dialogue related that are 2 sentences long because it's for the impact that we need 2 sentences. So 3 sentences is the way to go. Same thing with Queen of Kings. I'm going to show you here page 11, second page of chapter 2 of this edition. I'm going to put the details on the screen too. And here we can see that we have longer paragraphs. We start the page with a shorter paragraph, but again, 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences. It's easy to see because, again, it always starts with a capital letter. So, capital letter and, in this case, all final stops to mark the sentence. Then we go to the next part where we have a huge paragraph. We have a total of 8 sentences here. And then, what comes right after? A 1 sentence paragraph. That's how you mix and match those paragraphs. You never put a huge paragraph next to another huge paragraph. You put a huge paragraph next to a shorter paragraph. You never put a short paragraph next to another short paragraph. You always put a mid-size, longer size in the middle. The exception here is the dialogues, because dialogues are usually shorter paragraphs, and that's okay. So what can you take from this lesson is that the paragraphs are the essence of your story. The paragraphs are what dictates the pacing, the flow of your story. Yes, of course, the sentences have their major importance too, but the paragraphs are made of sentences, and if you control how many sentences go into a paragraph, you control the rhythm, you control the pacing, you control the flow of your story. And of course, if you control the flow of the story, you control your reader's experience, which is what we all want. I would love to hear how this perspective, this new piece of knowledge, changes how you perceive your own work. So open your work in progress in a random page and tell me, what is the layout looking right now? Do you have a good mix and match of those types of paragraphs? Do you have a big wall of text that you need to chop down? Or do you have those fact listing layout that you need to improve and feel a little bit more of details there. Please let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see what are the patterns you are discovering about your own novel. I love to see like these new discoveries we make when we return to our projects. And of course, if this lesson helped you see your manuscript under a new light, then please consider subscribing and hitting that bell so you get notified when I post new stuff. We're going to be doing a lot more of these lessons about different topics here on the channel, so I'd love to have you along for this learning journey. So I will see you on our next edit, and until then, go fill your book's margins. Bye!